right. Welcome to our prophecy update for Community Church of Devore. My name is Marco, and we're glad that you join us. It's a little bit different than what we normally do. I normally do it at the congregational level. We do it at the Wednesday night service, but this week there were so many news going on and so many updates that needed to happen, specifically dealing with our nation here in the United States, that I wanted to give a bit of an update the next day after we taught on Babylon and Jerusalem, and you can find that at our YouTube videos. But we welcome you and we thank you for joining us. I did want to talk about a few things before we finish today. There was some interesting information happening at the border, and we want to give that update. But we did want to start with the AI world, And what I mean by the AI world, and there's quite a bit of stuff going on in our technology. And the technology of AI has changed rather dramatically. It's changed the world as we know it, and it's going to keep on changing the world as we know it. And we believe as Christians that the proliferation of AI in many different fields in technology is only going to accelerate what we believe is the road to the image of the beast. Now, in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, we see that there's not only the Antichrist, the first beast that comes out of the sea, the second beast, which comes out of the land, which would be the false prophet. And the false prophet gives breath and gives life to this interesting character called the image of the beast. And we're told that not only the false prophet brings life to the image of the beast, but also institutes the mark of the beast. So they're very much related. And the image of the beast has always puzzled Christians throughout time. What could it be? Would it be a statue to speak, demonically empowered? And many different reasons and many different ideas that have gone through the centuries. But ultimately, the image of the beast is something that is future. We haven't quite seen it yet. And this image, of course, will be given life, a breath, and it uses the very same language that is found in the book of Genesis, where God gives breath, gives life, gives spirit to his own image and likeness, which is Adam. And here this image will be made, as it were, in the image of men, and will be given power by the false prophet, who receives his power from, of course, his relationship with the beast, which, of course, they're all empowered by Satan himself. And I wanted to show this video because it is kind of an interesting thing. There are many people who believe that there are two sides to the AI world, which would be the one is the good side that believes the AI will be able to help humanity evolve, and we sort of have to connect with the AI world and be part of it, and hopefully they don't extinct us. And those will be people like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and others who believe it's a good thing and it's inevitable, so we have to join it. Other people like Bill Gates and the World Economic Forum, they believe AI is going to rule the world. It's going to be the most important invention of humanity. And I don't think they have very benevolent ideas of AI. But I want to show this video in relation to it. It's not a joke, but it's relation to hopefully the AI finds us interesting and they don't exterminate humanity. And it was done in relation to what Elon Musk had to say. And so I'll just play this video very quickly, and then we can move on.
I talked to Elon Musk the other day, and he thinks we'll get things more intelligent than us. And what he's hoping is they'll keep us around because we will make life more interesting. If you have a world without people in it, or without animals in it, it's just not as interesting as a world with people in it. That seems like a pretty thin thing to rest humanity on to me. But he thinks it's quite possible these things will get much smarter and they'll gain control.
Now, the after-mentioned video that we talked about has to do with the thinking of a lot of people that we just have to join with AI. Well, there goes this scenario where people think Elon Musk is some kind of hero, and I do admit that we do agree with a lot of things he says and a lot of things he's doing, but he has his own agenda. I believe he has his own agenda, and I believe ultimately, as he has stated, it will have to do with some kind of implant, chip implant with his Neuralink, with his company that has internet access, satellite access to the internet. And of course, Twitter it's a platform which he discusses a lot of these things. But it is this flimsy scenario that AI will keep humans around if we are somewhat interesting pets. And this is what he believes AI is going to do. Now, we do see it in our world. Chatbot GPT has literally changed research and will continue to change research in such a way that now we have, I don't know if you understood that the Writers Guild is out of work, and some people think they might not come back from work, at least not in its current form, because AI will replace a lot of the writers, will replace a lot of the people that have been doing the script writing, and that all could be replaced by AI, which I wouldn't be totally against replacing those people, but we understand that AI will change humanity, the world, work, and we'll talk more about that because I think there's a lot more to be said about AI that we can talk about it in this update. And of course, I believe that it is going to be demonically empowered eventually in some form. That's my personal opinion, and I believe that from Scripture, it fits a lot of the things that we're seeing today. It's not the ultimate thing. It's the road to the image of the beast. I don't know what it'll ultimately look like, but I do know this image will be made in the image and likeness of men and will be empowered demonically by Satan to deceive mankind. We heard this week that Chatbot GPT actually can be talked to. It has a voice, and you could see who you're talking to. So it is becoming more invasive. It's becoming more powerful, and eventually people will look to it as some kind of savior, looking for answers. I mean, we already look for Google, and many of our society becomes we seek after answers, and Google becomes the all-knowing part of our world, in which we could just Google something and it becomes truth. And of course, we always have to double check things and realize that the ultimate truth is always God. It's always the truth. It's always what Christ has to say. Now, it is interesting, and this is just a side note. Wendy's has unveiled a Google Power AI chatbot at a drive-thru. Now, we've seen already that many companies have abandoned the worker at the fast food level, and they have developed different kiosks and robots to replace those workers. Well, this is no different. Wendy is reportedly developing an artificial intelligence chatbot powered by Google. Can you imagine that? So you can't get away from Google. It's even in your workplace. It's even in your food place. And of course, here we're talking about a fast food chain that it's going to roll out in June, using natural language software design and automated through the drive-thru. So fast food chain's chatbot will be rolled out, and this chatbot will be very conversational. You can have a conversation with it as if it were a human being. So Google Cloud's generative AI technology creates a huge opportunity for deliver a true, differentiated, faster, and frictionless experience. This is what the press release, and it's going to be a separate conversation about whether they're going to replace all the workers eventually. Well, that's separate, says Wendy's, which is looking forward to cutting down cost, and this will be a part of it. Now, I believe that through AI and innovation and technology, there's which normally happens. There's a technological breakthrough. Certain industries get affected the most. Well, I believe AI is going to affect quite a bit of industries: finance, script writing, software engineering, all these things. And what's interesting is we thought it would be the normal average worker that would be affected the most. It seems to be that it's the higher paying job, like maybe a journalist, maybe a software engineer, maybe a code writers, basically those who write code. Those are going to be the ones affected the most right away. Like farming and manual labor seems to be the least affected as of now. Now, lawmakers are moving very quickly to regulate AI, and that is happening in Europe, that is happening in the States, maybe not as fast in the States as we would like it to be. China is, of course, all gung-ho and very much for it for quite a long time. But the European Parliament has announced that it'll bring the first steps into regulating artificial intelligence to ensure that it's a human-centric ethical development, which really doesn't mean much except for they're trying to understand chatbot GPT. They're trying to understand how AI works, and they're trying to find out how invasive it's going to be. But for the most part, it's going to be something that humanity will have very little control eventually. We've known the stories, and we've heard many of the stories where engineers from Google, engineers from other software companies, Microsoft, who have said AI is becoming so advanced and quickly learning things that it was never taught. So machine learning, and will it become sentient at some point? I don't know. But I do know that eventually, in my opinion, I do know that this AI will be demonically empowered to be seen as sentient, to be seen as something that it's all-knowing. And with the advancements in technology and access to the internet, chatbot GPT-4 has access to the internet. Now it can be seen. Now it can be talked to. You can have a conversation with it. It's going to be very difficult to control what people do with it. And if governments want to learn more about it and they have access to it, it could be quite a kabuki theater at this point, because governments, I believe, are already using it in major ways. So welcome to Skynet. And this particular video here is how artificial intelligence, facial recognition, are being used interlinked to surveillance, to provide surveillance in China. So I want to play this video here. It's very interesting, about a couple minutes long, and it's really to crack down on anyone who is considered an enemy of the state. So let's watch this video very quickly.
The government can collect about its 1.4 billion citizens. Everyone over the age of 16 is required to have an official state-issued ID card that the government now wants to use to centralize all that information. And China is investing heavily in tech companies to help transform that government data into a virtually omniscient surveillance network. One of those companies is Megvii. It recently received a capital investment of nearly $500 million, part of which is from a state-run VC fund. But the name chosen for its premier piece of technology is a bit of a tell. Skynet.
Yeah.
What is that?
The Terminator is the favorite film of our founder. So they use the same name, but they want to put something good into this system.
So, okay, in the Terminator, Skynet is evil, rains down death from the sky. But in China, Skynet is good.
Yeah, that's the difference.
So how do you think your facial recognition technology will change China?
Everything happened in the public can be record. We can know exactly what happened in every second, in every corner of the city. This is a video stream in a subway station by our smart camera, so we can capture every face in real time. Still like some criminal person is out there. There is the red box, so there is a warning to the police station that there is a criminal person, so I need to locate them.
So when it looks out onto a crowd, it's tracking all these faces and it's cross-checking those faces against what?
Criminal database.
And how many fugitives have been apprehended through this system?
Over 3,000 cases in nationwide. Yeah, just one year.
In 1 year?
Yeah, 1 year.
Wow. So what you're working on now already seems like sci-fi. What do you think the future will look like in like 5 years?
Have you seen a film just like a Black Mirror? You just stand there and your face there is a point. So maybe that is the future.
But that's like a horror show.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that is maybe the kind of the future. Every people have their social points, I think.
If you like spit gum on the sidewalk, it will
Yeah,
record.
your points.
China, of course, has 600,000 surveillance cameras, half of the world total. And this is all controlled by AI, artificial intelligence. They've been doing this for quite some time. I think we were doing prophecy updates 2013, 2014. And we were showing videos as much as we can get our hands on of things that were going on in China. And most people did not even know that things were going on. The social credit score was coming on at that point, at least in the horizon. And now it's here. Now it's sort of a given in terms of how China uses social credit score, especially after the lockdowns in the past few years. Now, of course, in Europe, they would like to use this, and everyone in Britain should be given a digital ID incorporating their passport, driver license, tax records, qualifications, right to work, cornerstones of a technology revolution, said Tony Blair, and Lord Hague of Richmond said. They said this, I believe, last year or the year before that. I don't remember exactly when they said it. But it was basically the idea that politicians are very involved in bringing technology to our world, to, of course, to control, for surveillance. And this is seen in Australia. In fact, it was quite interesting. Just today, I got an email from my dear friend Davey, and today we've seen that there's 4 schools in New South Wales that have been sent home because of the rise in a certain virus that has come back on the scene. So 4 schools closed, and basically the students were told to go learn from home. And it's caused a great deal of panic in those communities. Now, what has this has to do with control and surveillance? Well, if I were to ask a question, what does AI, CBDC, cyber attacks, climate change, and lockdowns have in common? Well, everything. We are heading to a centralized control of the economy, of behavior, of movements of individuals, digital currency, cyber attacks, which have been pretty prevalent the last few years, and climate change are going to be all part of our new world, our brave new world, as we was referenced to the book. But here in South Wales, we see a rise in panic. Now people are being told to stay home, at least 4 schools, told to learn from home. And many people began to think and reminisce on what happened over the past few years. Now it's interesting, things have changed. And by their own words, the World Economic Forum has admitted that the lockdowns and the virus was used as a great opportunity to bring about something that they really wanted to do, which was to bring awareness for climate change, a digital world, more surveillance, and we're heading toward that. In fact, last month, if you guys remember, we talked about, I think it was in Catching Up with Jacob, we talked about that somebody posing as Vladimir Zelensky, it was 2 podcasters, Van and Lexus, used interesting technology to fool, and they did a prank video on Christine Lagarde. Now, it was interesting, there was another prank call on Jerome Powell just recently. But the one with Lagarde was really interesting because she admitted on the video, and it was uploaded. I believe you can watch it on Rumble, that the president of the European Central Bank, Lagarde, generously shared the information with which she thought it was Vladimir Zelensky, but it was actually the 2 podcasters, that the European Union is using and will use a digital currency. And recently we just seen some of the digital coins that have come out, and it could be traded. It could be already traded on the market. It confirms that they intend to prove the digital project on behalf of the central bank digital currency. And the final decision, according to Lagarde, will come October 2023, and they're preparing for it. And so one of the questions is, well, couldn't you just not use it? Could it be used for control? And she admitted, oh yeah, there will be control. She revealed that the purpose of the digital currency is to indeed implement control of all the payments that people can make. So there you have it, from the horse's mouth, Christine Lagarde, regarding European Central Bank. Now, Australia and Britain as well are canceling cash. So there's been a war on cash for some time, but none like the last few years. Last month, an ANZ bank, which is the second largest bank in Australia, began to remove cash withdrawals facility, meaning that the branches began to remove ATMs all over Australia in a move toward a cashless society. Britain has also accelerated this to a cashless society model within the business in London, refusing to accept cash. Can you imagine that? Now, this all seems like a dystopian movie. This may seem like something you've seen maybe in a bad dystopian movie, and maybe you remind of maybe somebody screaming in a corner telling you the world is going to end and people ignoring them. But it is true. What Christians has been saying a long time is that we're moving away from cash as a way for governments to control and eventually lead to some kind of permission in order to buy, sell, or trade. And this is what the Bible and believers and Christians have called for a long time, the road to the mark of the beast. Well, we recently did a video on it that you can find on our channel on Devore Truth regarding the mark of the beast, what it is, what it isn't, the name, the number, the image. And now there have been some Christians who have criticized myself and others who believe that the cashless society of digital currency are the road to the mark of the beast, saying that it could be something else. And I agree, it could be something else. But as we approach the end of the age, the things happening in our world gives us an indication of what the Bible speaks about, meaning that the Bible has been telling us this for 2,000 years, the book of Revelation written 2,000 years ago, roughly, and telling us that there's be some kind of permission. Now, of course, it doesn't have to be the digital currency that is the permission. Cash and currency could always exist alongside a permission, but whatever it is, it will be used to control the purchase and the selling and the trading of everybody in the world. Right? So whether you're rich, you're poor, whether you're free or bond, it will be given a mark. And we talked about the mark quite extensively. It was about a 20-minute video. And it's quite interesting because what we see today is more and more governments are going from credit cards to Apple Pay to Google Pay to biometric means of payment, and that is becoming a reality. And it's really concerning because not only are CBDCs going to become a reality in many countries, but it's no longer a conspiracy theory, and they are also going to include the control of different aspects of our lives, including money, health, and climate change. Carbon emissions limitations will be embedded into the central bank digital currency. A social credit system, ability to fly, to travel, will be more and more realized in order to be controlled. This control will be more realized. Now, the opposition to the CBDC, it is quite interesting too that most of the opposition that I've been able to find, although there are some oppositions in Europe, some oppositions in Australia, but they are the minority. In the States seems to be a more robust, I guess you would say, more robust resistance. In states like Texas, states like Florida, states like South Dakota have recently, especially South Dakota, recently vetoed a bill which outlawed basically the use of cryptocurrency. So outlaw the banning, the banning of cryptocurrency. And these outlaws cryptocurrency like Bitcoin are basically preventing or trying to stop the launch of CBDC. That this bill that the governor of South Dakota, Kristi Noem, that denying the autonomy of South Dakota to choose the way in which they will use their money, therefore vetoed in order to respect the civil rights of the American Constitution above any law or authority, any other institution. That her role was to protect the citizens, which is kind of refreshing to hear politicians do that. So she vetoed a bill which outlawed cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, and which at the same time paved the way for CBDC. So she vetoed that bill, and there's other governors who have been doing that. And there are some states who perhaps at least for now, are resisting it. But one thing that I found really interesting was Israel's role in this. Last month, we were informed that the Bank of International Settlements, which is called the BIS, which is the central bank of central banks, big brother of big brother, in the world, has a project called Icebreaker Project, which was basically successfully completed. Unbeknownst to a lot of people, the Icebreaker Project proved that the international payments using CBDCs between Israel, Norway, and Sweden was successful. The completion of this project teaches us that Israel has developed the CBDC infrastructure. So if you think about it in the big scope of things, the infrastructure and how it's going to be worked and how it's going to pave the way for CBDCs in other countries has already been tested, been used in a test called Icebreaker between Norway, Sweden, and Israel, which is kind of an interesting thing if you know Bible prophecy and what Israel plays a major role in God's purposes and plan for the last days. And these advanced stages already would not have been able to of the project would not have been able to be successful without the participation of these three countries. The project concludes the experiment of the new architecture for cross-border payments. And the Bank of Israel is describing the possible events that would lead to a decision in Israel to launch the digital shekel. And this is steering the committee and preparing the way for the Bank of Israel to issue this shekel. In other words, the Bank of Israel is preparing for the public. The issuance of the digital shekel is only a matter of time. This is quite interesting. I've been to Israel. Friends of mine live in Israel, very dear friends of mine, ministry friends. And they are concerned that Israel has moved very quickly toward a digital shekel, digital currency, and the infrastructure is there. Many tech companies are there, and the announcements basically gave away 5 reasons for the expedition and what they call the acceleration of the digital currency, and that they need to keep up with other countries, I said. Number 1. Number 2, the future reduction of cash. The future reduction of cash usage means of payments, as means of payments, expanding the payment apps and electronic means of payments in general. So they want to move away from cash and for more of a digital payments. You already had those, like I said earlier, Apple Pay, Google Pay. The prevalence of the payment in stable coins, like crypto and other private means, meaning that something that's not a digital shekel might impede the payment system. So they don't want a competition. Basically, they don't want competition. And number 4, the issuance of digital currency by the central bank would support competition in the payment systems and the financial system in the digital age. So they want the central bank to support competition in the payment system. So on the one hand, they don't want anything to compete. On the other hand, they would like a central bank support competition in the payment system and the financial system in the digital age, meaning that they'll still use the CBDC, but it'll be used by different companies, as long as they use their CBDC, as long as you use their spyware, as I like to call it, spyware that would control everything that you buy or sell. And the issuance of the digital shekel could be justified with hindsight, since it could provide an efficient and safe platform for advanced technologies and applications. So everything you didn't want the government to know about you and the privacy, well, that would be all gone, especially with Israel, which large part of the economy has to do with cash, has to do with the economy that it avoids basically going through credit cards of the institutions of banks, and it operates largely on cash. And so they're battling that. And would it ever work? Well, like I talked to a friend of mine today, Israelis always find a way to get around things, and but this digital currency is something that's coming, and Israel's paving the way for that, as well as other countries. It's not one, but the infrastructure, it's already there. The world status, 11 countries have introduced digital currency. The G7 nations are developing it, and 18 of the G20 are in advanced stages of the CBDC. So you see the developed countries are already locked stock and barrel. Central bank digital currency. 112 countries representing over 95% of the global GDP are exploring CBDC, and there's more to that coming maybe in future videos. But what about cyber attacks? We mentioned cyber attacks earlier. What it seems to me is that the World Economic Forum, other countries, I should say, as well as companies, I might add, are basically admitting that the big problem in the world is cyber attacks. You recently heard about Cyber Polygon, which was WF running scenarios on what could be a possible cyber attack in the world and what would happen if all the electricity and all the internet goes down. Well, specializing in what's going on in the world, many journalists, excuse me, many journalists and people in the tech industry expounded on the fact that the idea of going after cryptocurrency and Bitcoin conducted by the government around the world, these cryptocurrencies are being purposely derided in order to prepare the world for CBDC. So if you think about the government in the U.S., how it's been adamant about destroying cryptocurrency markets and specifically Bitcoin, as well as the European market doing the same thing and trying to control it. The Biden administration warned that Bitcoin could be a central drive for cyber crime. Well, I have other ideas about the cyber crime, which involves the Biden family, but that's for another story. This claim is baseless, because the World Economic Forum policy statement presents crypto as a threat, and therefore they have to monitor it, and they have to completely control the financial system. So cryptocurrency does not fit into their agenda because it's decentralized. Many of it is decentralized, some of it is centralized. And their goal is, of course, to ensure privacy in favor of the full adoption of CBDC. So the people want privacy, but the World Economic Forum wants to push for more surveillance. And of course, they're pushing toward the idea of linking the digital ID to the financial system, which is already happening around the world. Remember when Obama was president, this digital driver's license was issued in the US, in the European Union, in the UK, and Australia. And the initiative for digital identity has been accelerated the last few years. And there's a big one happening in the States. And I think it passed the Senate today about digital IDs, which we'll talk about another time. I mean, you can use some, we talked about it. You can use some of the digital IDs that are, not digital ID, I'm sorry. We can use some of the IDs in Canada and Mexico. And these IDs in the US can be used in other countries as IDs, not just passports to get into other countries, but as IDs in those countries. So we already seen a model for that. And these digital IDs can be for the whole world. Basically, you could be a world traveler by having one ID connected to CBDC, connected to your financial institutions, connected to health. And this has been accelerated the last 2 years. Now, Brazil and Australia are harnessing something very interesting. It's a banking model. And that banking model has to do with carbon and carbon footprint. And we'll watch a little bit of a video here of World Economic Forum advisor Yuval Harari, which we have grown to love or hate to love or love to hate. I don't know the difference, but he does provide a lot of insight in terms of how the World Economic Forum thinks. And he speaks very candidly about some of the future plans. So let's watch this video.
Many of the scenarios that I outlined before the pandemic, I didn't outline them as a prophecy, but just as a possibility. Maybe it will happen. It's not an extremely deadly virus. It's not the Black Death. And look what it's doing to the world. So now just try to think what will be the implications of a much bigger problem like climate change. Also, conceptually, it shows that, and here I completely agree with you, Rutger, that it shows you that you can change things on a massive scale. That, again, you can stop all flights. You can lock down entire countries. You can actually do that. And life goes on in some way. And this, I would say, may make us more open to radical ideas about how to deal also with climate change.
Now, the World Economic Forum also explains that tracking of individuals was always met with resistance. But this mysterious disease has changed the calculations of everybody. And according to their writings, it allow basically these measures, these lockdown measures, as a way to track, due to the greater acceptance by society of government intrusions into our personal lives. Meaning that before there would have been a big hoopla about, hey, I don't want the government in my business. I don't want the government to track me. I don't want the government to have, know my financial information and things of that nature. But ever since 2020, things have changed because people were panicking and were very concerned and were deliberately lied about many things. People began to accept what the World Economic Forum's plan was from the beginning, was to basically bring initiatives that would bring digital currency as a means of payment, and that would be rolled into surveillance, less privacy, and of course more surveillance and more control. Now, Australia's new banking initiatives are emerging as something that regarding the monitoring of carbon emissions. Brazil has the same trend. Those are the two countries that are spearheading this idea of carbon emissions tied to some digital currency, as well as your financial institutions. And we have some, you see some of these bank statements and credit card statements. By the way, they're not the only ones, but they certainly have been at the spearheading this movement. Canada does the same thing. The U.S., not quite on credit cards yet, but definitely when you buy and you purchase a plane ticket, it'll tell you your carbon footprint. So the same trend throughout the world. The Brazilian C6 Bank, it's a daily monitoring carbon emissions of citizens' personal bank applications. This raises the question, if they don't intend to take any action, why are they reflecting these indicators on their citizens? Because they were asked, are you going to implement it? Oh, no, this is just a trial. So, but why are you keeping track? Bottom line, at the end of the day, one could see that there is no connections between. One could say that there's no connections between these events. You can literally say, well, Pastor Marco, you're just making this stuff up. But however, there is quite a bit of a description and a natural evolvement in our modern society to the advancement of technology, that you could see the ever-increasing threat of cyber attacks, that fear and anxiety, and in efforts to integrate people into a system, and which it's a system of a digital infrastructure, the advancements of CBDC, the monitoring of carbon emissions and carbon footprint, that this tracking of consumption at a large scale for social credit system. If China is the model, then that's already a given. China's already been doing that. So it is possible to observe these points and connect the threats. And so I believe during the last few years, we saw the effectiveness of how people were completely anxious and panicking, and this gave way to obedience. People that would have gone along with it were calling for more restrictions and more lockdowns because they felt fear and they didn't really care about the privacy and the freedoms being eroded. And so there's no doubt that the raising of the fear and anxiety will basically cause people to sign up for any digital service, including biometric ID. You saw that over the last few years. I don't even have to convince you that this happened, because people signed up for even to turn their neighbors in exchange for protection. So it reminds me of a protection racket by the mafia. And but this is what the governments were doing. don't worry, we'll save you. We're the government. Just give us your information. And more people went down that road. The World Economic Forum also admits that the last few years opened the door for government intrusions in our lives, no matter how harsh it was. And you saw things in Australia that were incredibly harsh. Nobody could ever would have predicted that, let alone would have thought that they would go along with it. But they did. And now with the climate agenda, and you heard the World Economic Forum and many leaders in many countries and many governments around the world saying what a wonderful thing is for people not to travel, not to do anything. The economies of the world were shut down and the environment can breathe, they said, because of the lockdowns, and how they were praising the lockdowns because it was good for the environment, they said. Well, the goal is to increase surveillance, control, centralization of financial activities, digital IDs, digital banking. It's all there. The infrastructure is all there. Climate sponsor consumption monitoring normalizes life under constant surveillance, meaning that your CBDC, carbon emissions, whereabouts, tracking, and of course with the CBDC, you'll know exactly what you're buying, what you're selling. And of course, the cyber crimes are increasing and therefore causing anxiety for people to help speed the process. I believe that cyber attacks and cyber crimes are only helping people in their anxiety going more and more toward draconian laws and implementing these advanced systems. And of course, because of the trouble in the economy, in the economies of the world, it's not just the economies of Europe, the economies of Asia, of Russia, of the U.S., but here in the U.S., the Federal Reserve is admitting that more than 1 million Americans could soon lose their jobs. This is what they're admitting now. And the CPI didn't come so good, and people were having more and more jobless claims were increasing. And so you could see that the Fed, as much as they would try to raise the interest rates, they can't. And as much as they try to bring about a curtailing the inflation, they have to raise interest rates, or the catch-22. And they're trying to become very good at destroying the economy, in my opinion, purposely. And so there's a tremendous amount of negative momentum building up as we get into the middle of the year. Excuse me. Along with the banks failing, the next one that has happened after First Republic, PacWest is on the verge of being the next bank. Their stock price went down 22% this past day, and it's now closing to 80% so far down in 2023. So yet another bank that's really struggling. And you can think it's not just the contagion is not here in the U.S., but there's also Credit Suisse. There's lots of talks about Deutsche Banks in Europe. And the only reason why PacWest stock is falling so rapidly is because it's getting a lot of media attention. So people are pulling the money out of their banks, and the number of Americans filing unemployment benefits is jumping. People are very concerned, and the Labor Department shows that initial claims surged by 22,000. Well above the 2019 pre-shutdown levels. Even hedge fund manager says government may restrict bank withdrawals. And when you hear things like that, people panic. Again, fear and anxiety among the nations, people not knowing which way out, said Jesus. And this is exactly what we see in the world. Hedge fund managers and macroeconomist Hugh Hendry issued a major warning of the U.S. banking system. And of course, when you hear somebody in the hedge funds relating to this on Bloomberg markets, then it caused a major panic and capital flight away from the U.S. banking sector, is what he's saying. That it is justified when you look at the M2 money supply, which basically tracks money in liquid checking accounts. There's less and less people putting money into banks. And this can convince the government to step in and to prevent citizens from taking the money out of the banking system. So what you have seen here in America is less and less people trust their banks, less and less people deposit the banks. So the M2 charts which basically takes care of the liquid checking accounts, are less, and it's causing the banks to have less and less money available. So he says it may come in. He says that the government may come in and actually prevent people from withdrawing. So sometimes this causes a lot of panic. But he says, I would recommend you to panic. It's actually what he says. And because the decline in M2, the biggest decline of M2, deposits, not loans, deposits, and those are deposits are fleeing the system. He says it could reach a crescendo that the National Treasury and the Fed may come to actually restrict U.S. citizens from withdrawing money out of the U.S. banking sector. So once again, this is one of those things where people have to see what's going on. And people have asked me, Pastor Marcus, should I pull the money out of the bank? I don't know. I don't know because I don't know what the solution is. I know people buy gold. I know people buy silver. I know people buy Bitcoin to try to hedge against inflation and hedge against a collapse in the banking system. And that might be a way to go. I don't know. But ultimately, as citizens of heaven, as Christians, we always look to the Lord. And we always look to the direction of the Holy Spirit. But also we have to think about the fact that our citizenship is in heaven. And therefore our economy comes from heaven. We are supplied, of course, in this world, but we're supplied by, and our needs are supplied by and met by the Lord. So it is not so much for Christians to panic, but the world will panic. But as wise as serpents and gentle as a dove, we are to explore some of these things. And if your bank is having trouble, I would pull it out and go somewhere else. But that's really up to the individual. Not necessarily the opinions of others, but we're heading into a time where these CBDCs and these things that we've been talking about are going to come part and parcel. Now, just a few hours ago, we're recording this on a Thursday evening, closer to midnight, here in California. Title 42 has expired, and a tsunami of fentanyl and illegal immigration is going to be pouring into our communities. This is not just my words, but this is what experts, immigration experts, ex-FBI members, ex-military members who know what the cartels and drug cartels in Mexico have in mind. Mexican president warns that the U.S. smugglers and traffickers are now advertising that the border is wide open. So on one side, we hear here Democrats and different leaders in our government saying it's not that bad. Well, it is really bad. That the border is really, really a bad situation, a bad place to be. Illegal immigrations have surged. Title 42 has expired, which basically allowed Border Patrol to basically anyone found here in the States coming in illegally, they can deport them back to their country. But now Title 42 is gone. And with Title 42, which basically allow the deportation, obviously that is now expired, then undocumented migrants can come in. Illegal immigration can surge in the U.S. border. And now there's over 150,000 illegal immigrants at the border in Texas, not counting the ones in Arizona, not counting the ones in New Mexico or in California. These are conservative estimates. Thousands more will be heading toward the border. Not only the ones at the border now, but the ones that are coming not only from Guatemala. There's about, I believe there's about 8,000 and 10,000 from Venezuela coming in, as well as other countries that have been allowed to come through with different NGOs through the Darien Gap and Panama and Colombia. And they've been basically encouraged to come. And this is the craziest thing. It's basically the implosion of the border. The Border Patrol apprehension has gone through the roof this past week with the highest total. And Title 42 wasn't even dropped yet. Stunning numbers of apprehensions, drug session that basically seized the drugs, cocaine, marijuana, meth, fentanyl, firearms, sex offenders, gang members, you name it. It happens. It happens at the border. A lot of people just think they basically just poor migrants coming in, and there's some of that for sure, but there's quite a bit of the nefarious, criminal, and illegal entry of drugs and drug trafficking and sex trafficking that comes through that border. And that's been documented very well by videos. Even liberals, liberal organizations have documented it. So it's not just a conservative idea. It's not just a conservative plot or a conspiracy. And this is the one that got me the most today. The Biden administration, the Department of Homeland Security, conspiring with Mexico to signal illegal immigration when to enter the U.S. illegally. So the DHS has been found to be using encrypted channels on WhatsApp, which is basically an app that you can use to chat all over the world, and they're coordinating with Mexico regarding immigration. This is at the Rio Grande and at the well-worn cross at the Brownsville. Basically, immigration officials are being given information by our DHS where Border Patrol is, where they're not, and therefore they can actually come in and coordinate swimming through the Rio Grande and be able to come in at a high level, because this encrypted WhatsApp, it's actually serving a purpose and letting them know where the Border Patrol is not, and therefore they can cross through. Now, it's been very well documented that this is a war. This is a war because what happens at the border is you have several gang members, cartel, drug dealers, who are opening fire across the border to Border Patrol, to the DHS agents. Shootouts that have been filmed at the U.S.-Mexico border days after we talked about the surge here a couple of weeks ago, that there'll be a surge in cartel violence. So this incident that took place has been documented, been filmed. You can watch it online. Very heavy gunfire at the border, at the far Reynosa Bridge, and therefore this is again part and parcel of what we've seen before Title 42 expired. How much more we're going to see increased violence in border towns and other cities in the United States. It got so bad that even liberal mayor Lori Lightfoot in Chicago says enough is enough, as migrants began to arrive from the southern border, and they've reached a breaking point, she says. In fact, residents in Chicago melted down, and we did have some pictures of that when they were told that 250 illegal immigrants are coming to their neighborhood, and they melt down 250. Well, Texas gets about 10,000 a day, and there are hundreds of thousands who were waiting for Title 42. Definitely, it's not sustainable.
I know you're often seeing me watch buses leave Darien Gap and head up to the United States, but this is El Paso. Undoubtedly some of the people that we saw in Darien Gap. Buses are now on these buses. I've talked with quite a few of the people in El Paso, the aliens, and quite many of them have said they went through Darien Gap. This is definitely one of the routes. So Title 42 has been lifted, and the invasion has only just begun.
And again, goes back to NGOs, organizations like George Soros, who, People Without Borders, Nations Without Borders, who for a long time, along with the UN, have revealed a plan that they wanted to flood the Northern Hemisphere, America, Europe, with millions of immigrants. In fact, 600 million migrants, I believe it's the number that I read one time, that the UN believed it was going to come way back in 2018. Well, it only took just about 5 years for that to take place. And in a major way, obviously, we haven't reached 600 million, but we've reached quite high level of coming in, and there's more coming. And just a wave of immigration as they destroy the third world, which Latin America has become very poor, as they have destroyed through those governments and destroy people. They have been funneling in illegal immigration to the United States, hundreds of millions of migrants, in order to maintain population levels. So they say it's climate change, what the UN says. They say it's because of not enough farms, not enough work, not enough food. And the reality of it is a lot of these policies by the UN, World Economic Forum, as well as other countries, have made this possible for people to leave their country and head up to the United States looking for a better life. And they've done this through, of course, different organizations. And the sad part about this is because these migrants have been used. They basically are puppets, are used because they are looking for a better life. They've been used to promote something of a globalist agenda, and that is to destroy borders and bring about a global community, as they say. And the World Economic Forum did say, part of their 2030 plans, that the U.S. will no longer be a leading country in the world. Now, to that, I've got a couple of things before we finish. The wars and rumors of war. We'll talk more about Russia and Ukraine another time, but on Victory Day, Putin actually talked about the world has unleashed a war on Russia, and therefore Russia must fight back. So these, again, one of these inflammatory words that is causing more and more people more anxiety about wars and rumors of wars. And of course, it's not just Putin, it's NATO, it's the Ukraine, it's the US, who are promoting this war in such a way that it's increasingly portraying that Ukraine and Russia as existing in a conflict. And it's being supported by NATO and the Ukraine and Russia, and of course the precious people in Ukraine and Russia who have been killed in these international terrorists, basically, who have killed both Ukrainians and Russians. And this is, again, at the very heart of the prophecies of Jesus, that there will be wars and rumors of wars like this until the end. But this will give way to a major war. And the war that we have seen not only Taiwan and China, we have seen Russia and Ukraine, the issue with North Korea, of course, many other tensions around the world. But the other one that is at large, a very real and biblical implications and biblical nations being featured is Iran and Russia. Iran and Israel. And this past week, the EU foreign minister is deeply alarmed by the new round of violence in Israel. Now, what's going on in Israel? Well, this past week, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is basically an Iranian proxy, began to, on May 10th and 11th, this past couple of days, more than 350 rockets fired into the communities, including Tel Aviv, from Gaza. They fired Iranian missiles controlled by Palestinian Jihad. Not missiles, rockets. And Israel stands against them in defense against the Iranian-inspired violence. Now, there's been some fatalities. Israeli fatality from jihad rockets. 5 terrorists have been killed. This is day 3, day 4 now, of the Gaza operation. And this Gaza operation is called Shield and Arrow. It remains in place despite the fact that you have Qatar, Egypt, the UN, the US, and Israel. And Washington tried to persuade Israel to cease fire. But overnight, Netanyahu and Gallant, which is the prime minister, and the defense minister, are going to continue the operation Shield and Arrow, and they'll remain in place as they seem very calm that the communities located near the Gaza Strip, even though rockets have been shot, there's very little casualty within the IDF and Israeli citizens. But the IDF has struck at the Islamic Jihadist terrorist organization in the Gaza Strip. And they've been very calm about this, they said, because we want to continue not only withstanding the attack, but also go on the offensive. Hezbollah-inspired terrorists continue to fire rockets, and they believe that this is what they call the Galilean forces, the lone wolves, launching not only drones attacks, against Israeli targets and IDF targets. So the organization claimed several times in recent week that a number of drones has assembled and prepared for action against Israel. So we see that the communities of Judea and Samaria and beyond have been affected by this. Now the IDF and the Israel forces have been preventing more of an attack, and they've gone into the offensive, which of course has the world up in arms because Israel can't defend itself. And now Iran is, of course, taking credit for some of it, but Iran is meeting with Russia and Turkey to find common ground, along with Syria. And what's interesting about Russia, Turkey, and Iran, they concluded a meeting just recently in Moscow, just a couple of days ago, where Turkey recognizes Assad as the rightful, legitimate ruler of Damascus. Within the Muslim world, this is an important thing. In Syria, of course, have been devastated over the last 7-10 years. But Turkey's always held this tension with Syria. They've gone into Syria. They've gone into basically scrimmages against Syria. But it's interesting that now, with the help of Russia, with the help of Iran, Turkey and Syria seems to be heading towards some kind of peaceful agreement. And what's interesting about this, and we have to go to the book of Ezekiel. The prophet Ezekiel foresaw something that has never happened in Israel's history. A coalition of nations led by Gog and Magog, bringing in Iran, bringing in Turkey, bringing in other nations from the north and attacking Israel. Now, there's been a lot of speculations who Gog and Magog is. Gog is, of course, a leader. Magog is the land. And many people speculated it was Russia, and it could be Russia. Other people believe it'd be another nation. Other people believe it's just a spiritual battle. Other people believe this will be Armageddon. Other people believe this is what happens at the end of the millennium, Revelation 20, where Gog and Magog appear again. Because Satan deceives the nation, Gog and Magog go out and fight against the Lamb. And of course, Jesus, with the word of his mouth, destroys those who rebel against him at the end of his 1,000-year reign. But there's also this very possibility, this is an interesting possibility, that Russia, Turkey, and Iran, which are mentioned, if you believe Gog and Magog, it's Russia, that are mentioned in along with other nations who come against Israel in Ezekiel 38 and 39. And it's a war that, if we're correct, this happens before the millennium, and therefore these nations, Russia, Turkey, Iran, coalitioning together against Israel in Moscow, recognizing Syria as the president of Syria, as the rightful, legitimate ruler of Damascus, is quite interesting. If we do believe this is going to happen before the millennium, this is a Gog and Magog scenario, then we're seeing it build up. And I do hold to that fact. I do hold to the fact that there will be a battle before the millennium. Now it's my opinion. I do hold to that. Could be wrong, but it seems to be something's happening. And the recognition of Damascus, which rings of Isaiah chapter 17, where the prophet Isaiah sees Damascus ceases to be a nation because of the destruction that happens suddenly to Damascus. And so there are prophecies in the Bible regarding Muslim nations today, Arab nations today, Arab cities, Muslim cities that are going to face judgment in the end. And we are approaching that, and I believe we will see some of these things as the Lord gives us life, as the Lord gives us wisdom and insight. We'll be able to see these things approaching, and ultimately these things will happen as the prophets foretold. So that's all the time we have today. Did want to leave you with some encouragement today. Is the fact that many things are happening in the world. Many things are going on in the world, and it can cause a lot of fear and anxiety in people's hearts. And I wouldn't want to leave you with fear and anxiety, but with hope and the realization that these things are written that we may know that God is God, that he's the one that tells the future. The Gospel of John says the gospel was written so that you may know Jesus and that you believe in his name. And by believing in his name, you would have eternal life. Well, the prophets wrote so that you would know that God is the God of history. He tells history in advance. And I believe the things that we're seeing in our world are paving the way to what the scriptures say and what the scriptures foretell and what the scriptures are ultimately going to be fulfilled in these events. I believe the advancement of AI, I believe the advancements of technology leading the way to a central bank digital currency controlled by AI, the surveillance, the punishment against those who come against the government, draconian level style, are only going to give way to not only the coming of the beast, but the image of the beast and the mark of the beast. These things are, we're seeing the beginnings of it. We're seeing how the world has changed over the past few years, and even the non-believing world, the secular world, understands these things. And we have received in our church different emails, different phone calls, people wondering what is going on. And even in my own personal life, friends and people that I don't know that well, but have maybe approached me on the subject or talked about the subject, are very concerned of what's going on in the world. And I want to leave you with the fact that God foretold this in advance, that he is coming. Jesus Christ is coming back to reign. And these things are letting us know in advance that God is the God of history. God knows the future, tells us in advance what will happen, to prepare the way in our hearts for the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ to come into our hearts, to come into our lives, and make him Lord and King of our lives. He's the only one that can save you. He's the only one that can save us. He's the only one that died for us by dying on the cross and raising himself from the dead by the Holy Spirit to give us eternal life. That's the gospel. To believe in him, to repent of sin, and trust in him for eternal life. And so this is what God's message is for you and for I today. Fear and anxiety, yes. The nations will have it. The world would have it. The world will not know a way out. But those who know God, those who know their God, will know a way out. The way out is Jesus Christ. The way out is trusting in him, because he is coming back to reign and to rule in this world. The prophecies point to his return. We look forward to his return as our blessed hope, to be with Christ, to know him now and to be with him in glory and the kingdom of God coming to earth. Well, it may sound like a pipe dream to a lot of people, but the Bible has been foretelling this for quite a long time. Prepare your heart, prepare your mind, prepare yourself to meet the Lord. And you can meet him today. You can call on his name. Whoever calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Well, thank you for staying up with us. Another prophecy update. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing it. If you have any questions, if you have any prayer requests, please reach us at ccodtruth.org. That's our website. DevoreTruth@gmail.com is our email. Let us know if this has blessed you. Let us know if this has helped you. And if there's anything we can do for you, prayer, maybe you have questions, but especially those who don't know Christ and would like to know him, let us know. God bless you. Thank you for staying up.